A hero lies in you. I want you to pretend that you're looking in a mirror right now. And if you're looking for a savior, a hero, a guru, you're looking at her or him when you look in the mirror. Not someone up here who's gone to seminary, studied a few things, taken a few psychology classes, passed a few tests, and emerged as an ordained minister, but in you. We're all mirrors of each other's souls. So what you see in me, you see in you. What I see in you, I see in me. That's an important thing to remember because we're always looking outside of ourselves for that hero. Thank you, Melissa. That was beautiful. And thank you, Robert. That is exactly what I want to talk about today. But before I start, I've never smoked marijuana, either exhaled or inhaled. So I want to clear that up right now. But I was married to a pot smoker at one time, my first husband. And I remember the smell, and I remember the contact highs, and I remember, just this awful scent all the time. But, I got to thinking the other day. Now, I don't know how many of you have noticed the poor condition of our streets and our roads. But if we pass the law that legalizes marijuana in the state of Missouri, we could use the taxes from that to cover up the potholes. And we'll call it Operation Potholes. Somebody ought to vote that in on a referendum. Let's do that. Operation Potholes for legalizing marijuana for those who want to inhale. So, in thinking about this talk today, I thought about scripture, several scriptures that have to do with light. Light. In the book of Genesis, the first chapter and the third verse, God said, "Let there be light." And then the light overcame the darkness. When we read the book of Matthew in the New Testament, in chapter 5, verses 13 through 16, Jesus is speaking to the disciples, and he's also speaking to all those who are listening. And he says, "You are the salt of the earth." He goes on to say, "You are the light of the world." Now, when salt loses its essence, its flavor, it's pretty useless. Except we can use salt to clean out our driveways from the ice and snow, to make snow ice cream. I don't know how many of you made snow ice cream, or make ice cream with old crank, not the snow kind, with old crank, with rock salt. Salt has many purposes, but the main purpose that we use salt for is flavoring. It gives us flavor. It adds spark to our lives. Some people have salty personalities. That's not the positive side of salt. There may be some here, I don't want to offend you, who are pretty salty. But salt has its purpose when it's still good and it has flavor. Now, there's a salty young lady in this congregation today, and I say salty in a very positive way because she's got a lot of spice. And her name is Jackie Allen. And while we celebrate the independence of our country, Jackie, who comes from France, one of the countries that heralded our country's independence, gave us the Statue of Liberty. And her birthday happens to be on our Independence Day. She will be 90 on the 4th of July. Jackie, please stand. I didn't want to embarrass Jackie. I did ask her permission at our Wednesday night service, and she gave me permission to share her birthday because, like my mother, she's proud of every year. She's not ashamed to tell anybody her age, and neither am I. So, Jackie, we're so grateful that you're here. We know you spent 6 months in France in your dual citizenship, and we're always excited when you come home. This is home, too. And to celebrate your birthday, we're going to send some fireworks up on the 4th of July. the salt of the earth and the light of the world. Now, you may not always see yourself as the light of the world, but I don't know if you noticed Anderson Krinke, when he was up here on this stage, he knows he's the light of the world. He was looking around like, now this is an amazing place. I kind of like this. And when Duke many babies, when we start putting the water on, that scares them, they get a little uncomfortable. But I can tell he's a swimmer. Because he was just with it all the way. See, there comes a time when we forget who we are, but he still knows who he is. He still remembers where he came from, why he's here, and he marvels at the lights. Because the lights are a reflection of the light within him. He hasn't forgotten his light. That's the one great advantage of being around children. They inspire us to remember who we are, to remember our light. Now, in Jesus' time, when he was speaking in this parable, he was talking about a time when there were shepherds that worked in the fields, and they lived in a commune. So they lived maybe in a barn or a big building or something in those days. They all lived together, and many of them had plenty, and many of them had nothing. And they used butter in those days for the oil to light the lamps. And if you didn't have butter, then you didn't have a lamp. You didn't have a light. So what happens now? You don't have to tell me if your Wi-Fi goes out or you don't have Wi-Fi, and you just happen to be on there and you see that there's a name on there and they've got Wi-Fi. You sort of piggyback on their Wi-Fi. Have you ever done that? On someone else's Wi-Fi? A long time ago, if the utilities were turned off, they'd run a cord, especially in an apartment building, from their switch to over here to the neighbors and sort of steal their utilities, right? Their electricity. I know you've never done that, right? But when I was very young and very immature and thought I was grown, I lived in an old rundown apartment building above a store. And it was a dank and dark and kind of dirty place. And I lived with my former father-in-law, and he would have a cord running from his apartment to the apartment down the hall for electricity. Now, I know none of you have ever lived like that, but experience is the best teacher. And I've had some experiences. So they would borrow other people's butter to use for oil for their lamps, and Jesus would say, why don't you share? You shouldn't be hiding your light under a bushel. You shouldn't just keep your light to yourself. He said, a city on a hill is not hidden. It sits on the hill and lets its light shine to illuminate the whole world. What good is your light if you never shine it and if you just keep it inside? Let your light shine is what he said. Share your light, illuminate the world. So I was thinking about how would I demonstrate this story, and I love movies, especially children's movies. One of my favorites is Lion King. And in the Bible class this morning, we were talking about how did that get to be, why do I know the whole movie? Because I do. Well, when my twin granddaughters were 3 and they would show up at the front door on Friday night with their little bags, because they somehow knew the calendar and they knew when it was Friday and they knew it was time to go and spend the weekend with Nana and Papa. So they would come, and the first thing they'd say when they were about 3 years old, what do you want to do? We want to watch Lion King. Now they're 23, and hopefully in Atlanta they're watching this maybe, and probably saying, oh, Nana, quit telling that story. We want to watch Lion King. We watch Lion King so much till I can tell you every word of that movie. And I'm glad, because you see, children's movies are very metaphysical. If you watch children's movies, you're going to get a lot of adult ideas from those movies. A lot of ideas on how to live the best lives, how to let our light shine. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of the movie. Okay. So here's how it goes. You can get the point about what it means to remember who you are by letting your light shine. So the main character is Mustafa, his jealous brother, Scar. Isn't that a good name for a jealous brother? Scar. He's all scarred from being, the abused child or whatever he calls himself. And he's jealous of his brother, who is the king of the jungle. And he arranges to get his brother killed with the hopes that he will become king. But he's got a little king to contend with. His name is Simba. Now Simba is the lion cub. And he is destined to be king of the jungle to fill in his father's role. But his uncle convinces him that he's the reason that his father was killed. So Simba runs away. He runs away from himself. He runs away from his past. He runs away from the truth. And in running away, he meets up with this grubworm and this warthog. And they tell him that you put the past behind you and put your behind in the past. And so he adapts their philosophy of Hakuna Matata, which means no worries. So he tries hard to forget this idea that his Uncle Scar put in his head, that he was responsible for his father's death, that he had let his mother down, that he had let the whole kingdom down. And then he meets up with this baboon. His name is Rafiki. And Rafiki has an accent. And Rafiki's his godfather. Rafiki was there when Simba was born and promised Mustafa that he would look after Simba for the rest of his life. So Rafiki finds out that Mustafa's dead and Simba's running away, so he finds him. And he tries to convince him that he's not responsible for his father's death, that his job is to go back and be the king. He says, I can't do that. Hakuna Matata, no worries. So at one point, Rafiki couldn't get his attention. He had this little rattlestick, and he bops him upside the head. He says, ouch! He said, it couldn't hurt. It's in the past. How many times do we hang on to old stories and old beliefs and old attitudes that keep us from knowing who we are because we're in the past? We can't let it go. So Rafiki is still trying to get Simba to know who he is, and he takes him to the stream of water and he says, look in the water. And he looks, he says, I don't see anything, it's just my reflection. Look deeper. And he looks deeper and he sees his father. And when he sees his father, he says, oh, that's just a silly dream. That's not him. He says, look deeper. And then Mustafa says, remember who you are. Remember who you are. Finally, it clicks. He had been trying to run away from himself. How many of you have ever run away from something? I'm going to give you a little insight, because we get up here and we talk about these aesthetic things that they're kind of out there, but we don't get personal. So I'm going to give you a little personal insight. I told you about the apartment that I lived in where we were pirating the electricity. Well, I'm going to give you something a little more to let you know that I know what I'm talking about when I say how important it is to remember who you are and let your light shine. I'm not going to give you all the gory details, but over 40 years ago, almost 50 years ago, I made a big mistake. And I was so embarrassed by this mistake that I ran away as far as I could. Now, fortunately for me, I had started in Unity about that time. And I was doing a lot of self-reflection. But I was still embarrassed and worried about what other people would say and think about me because of this mistake. And then one day, someone like Rafiki came along, bopped me over the head, and said, remember who you are. You are a child of God. Let your light so shine among others that they will see your good works, not your mistakes. They will see your good works and glorify the Father within. When Simba looked into that water, what did he see? He saw a reflection of the Father within. It's not just about his physical father, Mustafa. He was looking at the Father within. He was seeing a reflection of himself. And he remembered who he was. It took me some years to bounce back from that, to put this into perspective and realize that no matter what happens, I am still God's whole and perfect child. We all make mistakes, and sometimes we get stuck We get so stuck in our mistakes in the past and what could have, would have, and should have been that we don't let our light shine. You are the city on the hill that Jesus was referencing in that scripture. You are the city on the hill. And a city on the hill cannot be hidden. Even when you try to hide it, people can see your light. Even when you try to run away from it, your light still shines. I was searching through my library and I came across this book by one of my favorite Unity ministers, Reverend Wendy Craig Purcell, who is the Minister of Unity of San Diego. And the book is called Ask Yourself This. Questions to open the heart, expand the mind, and awaken the soul. And in chapter 2, she says, ask yourself this, to know yourself better. In other words, to remember who you are, because at times we forget who we are. We think we're what someone else says we are. We think we're our past, some mistake we've made, we're still carrying around. We think we're not good enough. We don't measure up to what someone else is. As the saying goes, comparison is the thief of joy. And when we forget who we are, we can't feel joy. She writes, and I quote from Marianne Williamson, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not benefit the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It's not just in some of us, it's in all of us. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. Let your light so shine that others will see your good works. They will see who you are and glorify the Father that is within them. Because while you're letting your light shine, you're allowing others to shine theirs. The story, one of the stories I like most to exemplify this belief in yourself, remembering who you are, is the prodigal son. I was sort of like the prodigal son. I ran away, I escaped all the way to the other side of the country. The prodigal son in the book of Luke, it's in chapter 15, verses 11 through 32, begs his father to give him his inheritance now. How many of us are impatient? We want it now. That was part of my problem. And so the father says, fine, you can have it. You can have your share of your inheritance. And what does the prodigal son do? He goes off and he squanders all the money. He has a good time, big parties, lavish lifestyle. And when he had lost everything he had no place to go. He was too embarrassed to go back home. And so he got a job as a swine herder. And he ended up sleeping with the pigs and jealous of the food that the pigs were eating. Finally, one day, like Rafiki, something bopped him up on the head. Remember who you are. He made his way back home. Tail between his legs, pride hurt, and got the courage to ask his father for some food. His father didn't just give him food, he threw him a party. And his other brother was livid. How could you do that? I've been here all the time. I've been taking care of you. I've been doing all the work around here and farming, and you give him a party? He left us. He took his money and ran. And you give him a party. And the Father says, but you know I love you. You know how much I love you. You know how much I appreciate everything you've done. But this is your brother. Let's welcome him. Because he remembered who he was. He remembered where he came from. You have that same power within you. So let your light shine. We often forget who we are. We buy into what other people say, some past event, some past hurt, something we did or said that we regret. But every now and then you'll get that little bop on your head. And you'll see your reflection. And you'll remember, get just a glimpse of God's whole and perfect child that you are. Nothing and no one can separate you from the love of God. There is nothing you could ever do or say, no action you could take that could separate you from the Christ within. You are, every single one of you, no matter what you're going through right now, no matter what you've been through in the past, you are the light of the world. Remember that. As you go about the day and the weeks ahead, things will come up. And you'll start reflecting on some things you may have done you're not proud of. Or someone may remind you of something. Or you may compare yourself to someone else. Stop for a moment. Take out that invisible stick. Remember Rafiki. Bop yourself upside the head. Say, remember who you are. I am a child of the living God. I am God's whole and perfect child. That's the same kind of concept that Myrtle Fillmore had that started this foundation, that started this movement, rather, in the first place, because she finally remembered that she was not sick. I am a child of God, and therefore I do not inherit sickness. And she believed that with all her soul. And her light got bigger and bigger. We still feel that light right here in this sanctuary. And everywhere that unity touches, we feel the light of our founders, Charles and Myrtle Fillmore. As I close, I want you to turn to, in your hymn book, turn to number 126. It's called A Vision. I didn't know it was a song. I learned it as a poem in my early years in Unity. It so resonated with me. It reminds me to always remember who I am, no matter what may be going on in my life. So I'll read it and you follow along. In moments rare, there comes to me a vision unexpected. I clearly see within my soul the universe reflected. I am a part of all that's good. I feel, I know no limit. The God in all stands forth so clear, no fancied ills can dim it. No matter what life's future hours may hold of earthborn sadness, I know there comes to me in truth a heritage of gladness that far transcends all grosser things. I've caught the vision glorious. We are a part of all that's good, and good shall be victorious. Remember who you are. Made in the image and likeness of God, you are inherently good. Let's take that thought as we move into meditation.